mashallah, Sidi Abdul Kareem. It's great to be here with you, and particularly in this particular context. I know there may be people that have questions and would like to benefit from you being here. I really appreciate the way you come all the way from Stockholm. We did the trip Thursday, and obviously we met you there. Alhamdulillah, it was a really nice prelude to this, and mashallah, it was nice that you were able to reciprocate the visit. So jazakallah khair. We've spoken a lot we had a session yesterday and also in just private gatherings. It's something that we're both, I've really enjoyed the opportunity to exchange with yourself. And I think one of the things that, as Muslims and, with yourself as an artist, and I think there's a lot of commonality that we can read into expression, and also the beauty of the deen. I mean, often it's rendered, as we can see, in terms of religion, which has its roots in, linguistically, but it's not really what deen implies. And often people, when they become Muslim, they'll say things like Islam is a way of life, and it's a way of life, also a way of being. So, I asked you earlier in terms of that obviously you were artistic from your youth, and then you embraced Islam. How was the conversion process? How was that transition from a point of view and how you viewed your art? A lot of people, they find, particularly when they become Muslim and embrace Islam, it can be almost traumatic, and they find it very difficult to necessarily find that place of stability. But it's something that you've, I think, done very well, and subsequently, the kind of amalgamation of maybe a classic Islamic art and something which looks very European and very Swedish. I'd like to learn about, particularly that point of transition. How was it for you? Was it positive? Was it negative? Was it a source of inspiration? Did you feel muted for a period of time? If you'd like to share maybe some of those thoughts with us, inshallah.
I think for most people, coming into Islam, it's a process that it takes a couple of years to sort of be rooted, and like find your way and find your footing, so to speak. And also it wasn't just overnight for me. Like one day one is out in the street, and then the other way, all 5 prayers, and all of it is, like we discussed earlier, like the process for me was a lot through experience, the art of Islam, in many different layers. Like you have like architectural sense, and the all of that, but of course also the personal, the spiritual, like the art of living, the beautiful character, like beautiful. We say a beautiful deed, isn't it? Like that's the Prophet was the greatest artist, and then just seeing this, like you said earlier, also. Iman is a seed, for me it was like I got this seed of Iman, and then I felt like I need to nurture that, and then I went, to study properly. I already studied in Syria and Damascus, to kind of cultivate that seed and protect it, if you study Aqidah, you study religious sciences, then otherwise it becomes quite flimsy. And like we spoke about earlier, like what's the expression of the heart and what's the expression of the nafs. Like it's very, like people used to say, like a cliche, follow your heart, like what is the voice of your heart, and then, which is like very good to follow one's heart, but then the problem for most people is that they can't differentiate the voice of the heart and the voice of the nafs or the shaitan or what have you. So also the conversion was through arts. In like I found a book in a second-hand bookshop about Islamic patterns, and like because I was into art in different ways, painting, sketching, and drawing, also in music. But then when I saw these patterns, how they're constructed, it really felt like this is like entering a different dimension.
Right.
It's like this is another world, really. And connecting that to, start to get interested by Sufism, and then I realized that, to become a Sufi, I have to be a Muslim first, which is a bit scary. What was the question again?
Why did you find it scary?
Because of it's a great leap.
Yeah.
And you also posed the question of religion, like you join a religion, you sort of, there's the image of Islam in the West, and how it's portrayed, and all of those Muslim, they oppress women, they're violent, they're this, they're that, and they don't think, they just submit to a set of rules, and all of that.
I think part of it, the idea of you're going through, often as a convert, people are going through certain experiences of faith and belief and understanding that resonate very deeply. But then there's this idea of now taking the leap, and the Shahada can seem almost like joining a club, and that can be daunting, because when you see other members of the club, maybe you don't see eye to eye, or they have a different path, or it's interesting to hear that your way to Islam was actually through art.
Yeah.
So I suppose in that experience, did you find, maybe in meeting other misinformed Muslims potentially, that that there was a schism, or there was a kind of, am I allowed to continue with this? Because for a lot of people, whether it's art or music, or particularly any kind of form of self-expression, they feel that in order to be religious, you have to kind of do away with that and live a very kind of austere kind of approach. Did you feel anything of that, or were you kind of?
Yeah, of course. I was kind of disappointed, in the meetings and the, in the mosques. It's sort of like just the prayer and then go home, or the if there's a talk, it's like you have to go for 40 days. You have to sort of.
Right.
Like where are all the singing and the Mawlid and the beautiful things that I've sort of read about, or saw glimpses of, and so then when you realize that that's not the common thing, it's a bit disappointing. And then with this very staunch type of religiosity that is very common, all around. It's a bit, off-putting.
Yeah.
And I, some people might be convinced by this sound cohesive, but then again, it's very important, to also that you have a feeling that it's not right, it can't be. You also have an intuition of what's this sounds like a good argument, but it's something wrong here.
I think a lot of converts can feel something of that, but often it takes a huge amount of courage and perhaps something else. I mean, ultimately it's just guidance. Because a lot of people do get completely thrown off, and then 20 years down the line they realize actually maybe it not only is it permissible, but it may be something which is encouraged and celebrated within the broader tradition of Islam. I suppose one of the things that I'm interested is, we've had a number of reflections about Islamic art or Muslims doing art and you said something that I thought was really poignant, as in like, if it's not for God, what's the point? And that can seem quite a stark phrase, but obviously that's something that I genuinely feel that you live by, and I feel as though I can feel it in your work. But could you maybe explain that? Like, what is your source of inspiration? What do you mean by that, to do something? Because it can seem quite an epic thing to do something for God. How would you?
No, I think that these, for example, the classical like star-shaped patterns and things. They're not just that. We took this as a logo, branded, and we stick it on things, and it's our like company brand. It's kind of, if it just becomes identity politics, like
almost Islam is like an ethnicity rather than an experience.
Yeah, it's just a tribe.
Beni Islam.
Yeah. But I think what I experienced, with the patterns, that like when I saw them, the construction, and also applied in architecture, was that this is expressing something much deeper. That it is an expression of Tawheed. It is an expression of understanding who God is. And that's so much deeper than, some kind of identity politics thing. What I've understood from our conversations as well is the idea of identity politics is the main thing is about how you project yourself to other people, and less more about a cultivation of a genuine experience for oneself. And whether people like it or not is almost an irrelevancy. But the point is that just to have that genuine, authentic approach to what you do, and that it's inspired ultimately through principle, which leads back to God. So that's, I think, touches upon, like, if we call it Islamic art or Muslim art. Like, some people, it's just art done by Muslims. Or is it just like some music? I happen to be Muslim. I do my, do my thing. So, if it's sort of expressing Islamic principles, I don't think that there's a problem in calling it, Islamic art. But yet it's a claim, of course, to say Islamic. Like maybe I'm not sincere in what I do. Like maybe it's camouflaged nafs, and I just realized that I can sell my things better.
But I think you touched on the thing about, and we've reflected upon this like quite a lot. The idea of how the ego, the nafs, can mimic acts of the heart and feelings of the heart. And I think the idea when people talk about Islamic, if someone isn't necessarily even acquainted with that tradition, it becomes very much a kind of like, well, let me like make it Islamic by pasting a sticker on it. That kind of very like, better add in a mashallah or a this or a, and that like somehow transforms.
Sprinkle it with some.
Sprinkle it with and I think in order it's like something, there's something missing, because the beauty of like the art that you do is it's intrinsic. I'm interested also to hear about obviously you spend a lot of time in nature and working with nature, working with different types of woods, and we're just talking about what was the strongest kind of wood in Sweden is lilac. And it gives like a floral smell, and I know like you're very passionate about talking about the process. Do you have a particular kind of practice, or how do you, because you've talked also about the way you carve the wood, and you need to be careful that it doesn't, you're working with something that's still living, it still has. Can you explain something about that process? Does it have a beginning? Does it have an end? How does it feel when you eventually give that, or sell it, or gift it, or even put it on an exhibition? Do you feel as though you're imparting something? How does that feel? And the process
I think this touches upon the concept of slöjd. in Swedish. It's like you could translate craft into either hantverk,
Okay.
like that's crafts, but also slöjd. Slöjd is more like self-sufficient craft.
Okay.
Sort of countryside craft. Like in the cities, you had the craftspeople. They were ordered into guilds in the medieval times. You had the people making chairs. They couldn't put a little drawer underneath, like then they would be beaten because they're into someone else's territory, and then you had like very, very strict, how you and sort of like if you're working with a factory, I just do this one screw on the table. I have no idea where they source the material or what it's supposed to be, later. It's sort of
okay.
But in the slöjd tradition, it's more like, we need a table, or something, and then or like building a house, for example. Maybe walking out in the forest, and then the father would say to his son, "Yeah, this tree, you see this pine, it has some damage to it, so it's filling up with resin, and this would be this would be the foundation when we build your house when you get married in 10 years, or 20 years." It's sort of like you go out and you read the wood, like you read the forest. And like even my teacher, he's not religious or anything. Like one of my teachers in Jugge Sundqvist, he said that like he was looking for a piece, that's kind of like an S shape, that's a sofa for that's sitting from two different pieces, and he was driving around with this snow scooter. And in searching for the perfect tree, like for 2 days, and then he found it, and he said it was like a religious experience. And he talked to the tree and like, "Do you want to become a sofa for an exhibition in Stockholm?" This is up in Norrland, and this kind of sensitivity to like this is a living thing now. It's like a sacrifice. If I'm cutting down a tree, it's like it's not just clear cutting the whole forest like they do in a lot of places here. And there is no sense of this would become this, and it's just everything. We're just going to the sawmill. It becomes lumber, like good and bad. There's no, and maybe the good wood becomes just paper. Just mass, and the bad wood becomes planks, So it's, but if you're more sensitive, you know that this tree has been growing in this sense, so it has, it's very strong in this type. It would work perfectly for this kind of thing, in building houses or furniture or boats or what have you. So, but this takes a lot of. Like you can't do it in an industrial way, I think, like to be sensitive in that kind of sense. So if you think like Bismillah Allahu Akbar when you're sawing down the tree, and it's sort of, at least I try to be conscious of like not wasting, or for example, if they're clearing out things in the forest, you like try to use that.
Yeah. Well, on the retreat on the way back, there was a storm. And we got news that because you had to go back to the airport, and there was a tree in the middle, and you're just eyeing it up for what you could make different bows out of. And the guy came slightly late with the chainsaw. I think one of the things, because you were talking about also from the region where you're from, which is I don't know if it would be right to say, but almost like a cultural hub and of classic Swedish tradition. Yeah, it's true. Like that how sad you were to see that kind of just the kind of almost the massacre, the genocide of the trees just being lopped, and just and And maybe that's a difference in terms of your approach as it's truly Islamic, as in like the halal food is tayyib as well. It's how we rear the animal, it's how we take care of it. It's not just that you know, we just do the final slaughter but it's a production line type thing. You know, it's about almost being in tune and having an awareness of that, what's being offered to you and provided for you. You said something the other day about how a lot of people in Sweden will still go for a walk in the woods, and they experience something that we may even say, like you said, like a religious experience. Something which is outside of you know, something that can maybe quantified or in words or measured, but it's something that an experience of one's, we would say the soul or the heart. And then you said it was almost like that was a prayer for them, like a secular prayer in some ways. Could you maybe share something about what you meant about that? Because that in the relatively short time I've been here in Sweden, that's something I've really noticed a lot, that people's connection to the land and love for the forest and for the woods and for the trees and nature.
Yeah, a lot of people, they go out, you know, for walks, you know, in the forest, and they would feel, you know, grounded and, like you said, as it's and people would even say that, yeah, that's my religion. Going, like, because if you ask a Swedish person, are you religious? They would say, no, I'm not religious. And this creates, I think, you know, it's hard for people from other countries to relate when they come and they say, yeah, we have zero religiosity, like except for, you know, getting buried in the churchyard, in the graveyard. But then when they see that, well, actually they think this is sacred and this is sacred, you know. So, and also if we think about what does religion means, it's connection. Is it, correct me if religio, or in Latin is like to connect with the divine. But then, you know, because of the baggage of oppressive religion, like the very staunch Protestant, you know, the way that the church was controlling everything, you know, people get fed up with religion. And they're
fed up with almost the kind of,
they're traumatized, and they want to, like, and the same for me also. I couldn't relate to the name God. But, you know, when I discovered it, like in Islamic spirituality, I said, Allah, that's Allah. You know, it's, you know, to get away from the anthropomorphism and, you know, these concepts of a guy sitting in the sky.
Which is interesting because when we're talking about fitra, you know, this kind of, it's a difficult one to translate. I don't know how you do it in Swedish, but it's kind of natural, just this natural default and disposition state. But it's because you're in that natural state, the more the more they're able to recognize and connect. So, and I think that's one of the few things that we have left. You know, when we do go out into the countryside and we're able to reflect, there's something that you can almost escape your own self. And that's why, you know, a lot of people would describe it as a spiritual experience a lot of the time.
So the fitra, I really feel that Islam is it makes one connect to one's fitra.
Absolutely.
And that's what Islam does.
Absolutely.
You know, with the correct understanding that you sort of cultivate that connection. And it's not just, I joined the Arabic club. Or the middle, like become a Syrian or become a Moroccan. And I see that also in a lot of people, that they, you know, after a few years they sort of start to settle that and become maybe more patriotic
Yeah,
in a
it's
sense.
interesting. Yeah.
Like,
حب
but
الوطن
in a
من
positive
الإيمان.
way.
Yeah,
Like,
understood.
and I don't think that, I don't believe that you can do it without Islam.
I agree.
Because
I agree.
like nationalism always become you know, it always has this very destructive
Yeah.
element to it. Like, it's always like, oh, I'm proud of being Swedish, not like the Norwegians or the Danes or the like. You sort of like look down upon everyone else.
Yeah.
But to be able to be proud of where you're from,
Yeah.
and to appreciate and benefit from all the good things in your culture,
Yes.
in your traditions and
Yeah.
everything, and just
Yeah.
you know, to keep it.
Yeah.
And also to be proud of and to appreciate culture from Pakistan or from East Africa, or
Yes,
like where,
absolutely.
like, oh yeah, this is beautiful, and
Yeah. It's
and
almost
I
like an
think this is the
access card that you
fitri
can
thing,
go. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of almost like having, if you look like a tree, you know, there are different species which grow and are in their own environment and climate. There are trees that, you know, we have like evergreen here in Northern Europe. You're not going to find that in the desert. You're going to find cacti. But, you know, there has to be there's this awareness as human beings that there's a difference, and there's no problem with that. But we're at ease with that, and it's a source of benefit. And, you know, I think in my own experience in becoming Muslim, I've had far more access, you know, to various different cultures and worldviews, and all it actually expands your mind far more than it, you know, truncates and suffocates it, which is often the thing that people want to paste upon Islam.
Yeah.
That it's gonna ruin you. It's gonna like chop you down to size. And it's interesting that that's actually a worldview which is far more akin to the kind of tree genocide kind of thing. What always comes to mind is the time when the Prophet ﷺ, you know, he was asked if he'd like to have a mimbar made for him, and it was 3 steps, because previously he would just take a tree stump and lean upon it, and there was this amazing thing where he miraculously they heard the weeping of the tree stump, and all of the Sahaba heard this, and they compared it to like a mother yearning, you know, a child weeping, and the Prophet actually went up and hugged the tree, which is quite an interesting thing, you know. It's the sunnah of tree hugging, you know.
The sunnah of trädkramare.
Yeah, but he did that, and they said it almost, he soothed it. And I think people sometimes, because obviously there is a mu'jiza in that. It's a miraculous event. It's not something which can be necessarily understood through normative. That's the nature of a mu'jiza. It goes against the sunnah of Allah, the physics of how Allah has typically arranged things. But I think often we miss the point, is it just shows how connected he was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the land. You know, and he would always look up to the moon and greet the moon, you know, in the new month. And you know, the people around him took on that tradition, where like Sayyidina Umar wrote a letter to the Nile and placed it in the, like, stop spilling over your borders, and it actually came back and stopped, you know, listened to Sayyidina Umar. And there's this amazing, almost magical experience that they would have had as pre-modern peoples, but with access to that wahi, which I think as human beings we're dealing with the stress of not being connected to that, just living amongst concrete, you know.
And then this is very far away from how people think today. Like, if you, even amongst Muslims, if you would speak about that, they would, you know, that's
yeah, absolutely.
That's just. Like they would just disregard it.
Asatir al-awwaleen, it's fables of the ancients, it's like folklore.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, we're even talking about classical like Swedish folklore, and they have things like trolls and elves, and it's very easy to say that it's just nonsense, but there are words which maybe through Hollywoodization has made it seem unbelievable. Yeah. But definitely as pre-modern peoples, they would have had an access into an unseen reality and way of being, and no doubt that's the way they articulated it. Sometimes maybe it was accurate, sometimes it was not, But the modern experience is just to say, like, no, we can't test for it, for it doesn't exist. And I think the first person that suffers is often ourselves. We don't know who we are. We're just, bits of skin and, eyelashes.
Just
and
a biological
bone.
machine.
Yeah, exactly.
And we speak about what's it called? I lost the word. Like if the nature is enchanted, like we're living in the disenchanted world,
right?
Like we're like, and then what is sacred? How can you speak about things being sacred? Like you have to just argue that this is, we need to protect this because it has this economical benefit, or this kind of
or even, I mean, ultimately even like good and bad, really completely meaningless if it doesn't have that rooting. But it's interesting how I don't think as human beings we've quite yet, because a lot of this has happened so rapidly, we're not really aware of the detrimental effect it's had, because if we deal with our relationships and our connections like robots, we're going to malfunction, because we're not robots. We're human beings. We have hearts and souls and understandings of these kind of things. I mean, I think something that I've noticed even with my boys since you've been here is they're really fascinated in some of the work that you've brought and some of the pictures that you've made, and just the process. And I know you're also a teacher. How have you felt, or maybe you could share something with us about how you feel, why is it significant that children have exposure to this, to their growth, their broader development, to crafts and art and going out into nature?
Like you said, if you have a connection to what surrounds you and objects that you use, it has a great importance. Like and also, I mean, just like I said, the word slöjd, it also comes from an old word, slög. It's also slug, like being intelligent or like witty or even cunning, the kind of like to find solutions to things. Like, I have this problem.
You say crafty.
Yeah, crafty.
Is it related to craft, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So maybe one doesn't become a carpenter or an artist or that, but an engineer or something, and then because you've been playing with things, as a kid, you develop ways to solve problems and way to and for example, when we were drawing patterns, it's sort of like it's mathematics, but it's visual. Like you see it. That's what it is. Like when you're sitting in the school bench and doing like with the numbers, maybe it's like you can't get it, but then when you draw it, that's what it is. That's the root too, and it becomes. So I think in Islamic traditions, like bringing everything together, like there's a center to it. Like you can't draw a circle without a midpoint, and that's what the modern society tries to do. You have tried to draw a circle, but there's nothing fixed. There's nothing, no solid ground. What do? I mean, really, like for just young kids to these toddlers running around, like for them to be able to draw and to to play with things and to is so crucial. And then you get older, like to learn to do some crafts and things. I feel like I have some students who doesn't seem to have been exposed to that at all, and they feel truncated.
Right, interesting.
And it's like, I tell them something that I just think is obvious. I take for granted. Like for example, drawing a picture. You just make an oval, like this, and they're sort of like, how do I do that? You know, so they like become afraid of. I don't know if they never had the opportunity, or I don't know.
I think one of the challenges now, also on a purely practical level as well, is just like, you know, we're in the age of the screenager, and even before that, it's just everyone's just completely locked into these tiny little things, and the world is so much broader than that, because there's only so much meaning that you can get from an app or a game that is ultimately it's just entertainment. Whereas I feel with, you know, obviously understanding the caveats to the term and the broadness of the term, but with Islamic art, is it always pulled you towards something otherworldly and something, the ultimate purpose, even if it was stating in whatever way through poetry or art that this, we can't really grasp this. It's somewhat mystical, but there's that human representation of like, we're trying to grasp for something of what we truly are, and I think children intuit that a lot, because they're so close to the fitrah. As adults we almost become like disenchanted with the world and with ourselves, and you know, they say like the Enlightenment really kind of was the dawn of, you know, the self is the center of the universe, and then postmodernism is when the self is meaningless as well. So you will get this very nihilistic approach to everything. There's no meaning to a relationship, really, deep down. It's just functional. And I think art still has that mystery to it. You know, you can draw something that somebody's actually, you know, imagined something and placed it down on paper and gone through a process, and there's something very unique about that, which perhaps can't be done in any other way. You know, the ability to express in that way. Yeah, subhanAllah. I think if anyone has any questions, or, you know, they'd like to contribute, maybe it's a good time. If anyone has anything they'd like to share with us, it would be good to do. You know.
I was wondering, how should one think, or how can one protect oneself from becoming arrogant when creating something and people are complimenting it?
How, maybe you can share something if you want.
I think, you know, it's a real danger, really, that if one praises it, you know, like I Zaki told me, like, you should put on posts like Instagram, and you should make like this, and I put something out, and now, this 200 likes, and this like 200, you know, one is, you know, it affects you, and then one have to like remember, like, not being humble. I heard Issam Bashiri, like, he had a group called Outlandish, and I don't know, 10,000 fans of, you know, shouting his name, and he said that it does something to you. You know, it affects, like, he had to leave that because it's, you know, I think that we really look up to these people, you know, oh, he's very famous, oh, this famous person, and but then if you get there, it's like, you discover that, well, that's nothing. I mean, it's like, was it just this, you know, it wasn't as pleasant as I thought, maybe. So
may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be people and conduits to convey that beauty and that light in the most beautiful of ways that really resonates in people who are inspired and a source of inspiration, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. حضرة النبي. فاتحة.